The story of who exactly was the fifth Beatle has been long disputed. Some say it was Brian Epstein, others that it was George Martin. Well, I'm in Liverpool to hear a little-known but truly remarkable story of one woman who certainly has more of a claim to that title than most. Freda Kelly was the Beatles' first and only secretary, working for the group for 11 years. But she's rarely spoken about this time and the extraordinary part she played in the Fab Four's story. It all began one lunchtime in 1961, before Ringo had even joined the band. Freda was part of an audience of just 30 that day at the Cavern Club.
Beatles were on stage, and I mean, I'm a 17-year-old girl, and there's three good-looking lads up there. And I thought, you know what, I want a bit of this. Every time they were on lunch hour in the Cavern, I was there.
The Beatles noticed this young and very down-to-earth girl, although Freda's dad took a dim view of them.
George dropped me off one night, and Dad come down in his pyjamas and grabbed me by the scruff and said, "You in, and you clear off."
But Freda wasn't just a fan, she was a fully trained secretary, and the Beatles' manager, Brian Epstein, asked if she would like to come and work for him. Her dad was not keen.
What did your dad say?
"If you take that job, it'll only last a year." So I've just looked at him and I went, "Well, just give me the year."
Freda came to work here on Whitechapel. Back then, it was the site of Epstein's North End music stores.
So this is where you work for Brian Epstein, just here. Yeah. What kind of work were you doing at that point?
I'd done the contracts and the wages and general dogs.
The wages?
Yeah.
So like you were like, "Oh, Paul McCartney, there's your wages for this week."
Little brown envelope with cash in.
I love that.
Most of Freda's time was spent running the Beatles fan club and answering the sackfuls of letters that came in every day. But her contract was nearly terminated when one day she accidentally erased a tape of ideas for new songs, to the horror of Brian Epstein.
He'd given me this urgent tape, and it was a new dictaphone. And I wanted to, bring it to the front, and I pressed the wrong button, and I erased everything, and he went ballistic. But then he realised he was with the Beatle, and John started laughing and saved the day.
This was no 9-to-5 job, and soon the Beatles' families were almost like her own. One evening she came round to help with fan mail here at Ringo's house and met his mum, Elsie.
Knocked on the door, and she opened the door, and I just looked at her and I went, "I'm Freda from the office." And she went, "Oh, come in, love, come in." "Have you had your tea?" And I went, "No." "And don't you fancy egg and chips?" I went, "Yeah." I had egg and chips every week for years.
Oh. I'm thinking maybe you were, in a way, a link for their families, between them and their new world and their old life, in a way.
Yeah.
You could share, talk
because
openly.
I knew it wouldn't go any further.
By 1964, the Beatles had the world at their feet, and on the 10th of July, they were honoured in a civic reception at the town hall. Freda was at the do.
Could you describe that night?
It was the sound of the doors, of them walking onto the balcony, and the force of the noise. It was about 200,000 people. And that's when I realised that they were famous.
But 1964 was also the year that Brian Epstein moved his offices to swinging London. He asked Freda to go too, but this time her dad put his foot down.
I thought it meant the end for me with them, because my father wouldn't let me move to London. Brian Epstein called me in the office and said the Beatles definitely didn't want me to leave. So what they had decided was I could have his old office.
Freda continued to run the fan club until 1972, 2 years after the demise of the Fab Four. But she still retains a little memento of her favourite Beatle, a lock of George's hair.
But it's sealed. It's sealed. Will you ever open this?
No, I don't think so.
Eventually, Freda got a new job with a Liverpool legal firm, and she's still working today. But part of her will always be the Beatles' secretary.